All right, everyone. Excited to have everyone on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we'll have a really special guest, Saunders, who's a cancer biologist, and we'll have a lot of fun chatting about the research that he does, about the current predicament we're in with COVID-19, and we'll also be playing a really cool game where you're going to be testing your reaction time and seeing if you can be faster than me and Darren. So, to get everything started, so just to let you know, I'm your host for the day. My name is Michael. This is something that I've created and started, and hopefully that it's going to bring a little bit of science back into your lives during all the trouble that we're having right now. So we're going to be playing a little game called Psych Tests today. So what I'd love you guys to do is head on to Google Play or the App Store and download Psych Tests. It's all free, and this is the game that we're going to be using today to be able to test our reflexes. I'll bring that up one more time. So grab that. Really easy to remember. Psych as in psychology and tests. Head to the store and download that now, and we'll be playing that after we chat a little bit to Dr. Saunders. So the other thing I want to say before we start things up and before we get Dr. Saunders online is these are our socials. So if you want to drop us a line during the show, if you want to take any photos of anybody doing some science and actually collecting some data, that would be great. We'd love to see them, because you know what? You guys can see me, but I can't get to see you guys. So it'd be great to see how you guys are using the apps, what you guys think about the data, and how you guys are making sense of everything that we're going to be doing today. So we'll get Dr. Saunders on in a little bit. In the meantime, what I will do is I'll show you what that game is going to look like. So we'll head to the game. This is it. So this is how you'll be playing. You'll be able to see me play at the same time. What I'm going to want you guys to do to set this game up, and I'll mention it again a little bit later on, is there's a little button up here. You'll see me tap it. It looks like a little notepad. When you get in there, what I want you to do is type in the game code online. So all in lowercase. Make sure if you're using some kind of an Apple product, they always like putting a capital letter in there. Make sure you hit that lowercase and type in online, and then hit done, and make sure you hit submit. So when you hit that submit, you're going to be connected to the class. We'll be collecting all that science data with you guys, and you'll be putting it into a dashboard for us, and we'll be able to look at it later, which will be really fun. The really awesome thing about it as well is there will be a leaderboard to see who has the fastest reaction time. So if you want your name on that leaderboard, make sure you hit this little person button and type in a code name for yourself. Don't give me your real name. I don't want to know that. Just type in some kind of code name. I'm sure you guys are much better at thinking of some cool code names than I am. So I'm just going to type in this really lame name here, because I am not nearly as creative as you guys are. Make sure you hit that done button and make sure you hit submit. And once you do, it's all going to be hooked up, all connected, and you'll be absolutely, utterly ready to go. So let's drop out of the game, and we'll drop back in to my beach getaway where I'm staying right now. I wish I could head to the beach, but we're still into our quarantining, which we'll actually be able to talk to Dr. Saunders about that as well. So let's take a quick look to see if he's logged in. No, oh, there he is, yes. So I will let him in, and now it looks weird because there's two of me on here. So hold on a second. Let's see if we can change that to, there we go. And I will just do, Aaron, how are you?
Hello, how are you, Michael?
Doing very well, thank you. So this
technology worked.
Yeah, you've been doing this quite a bit. So everyone, let me introduce Dr. Saunders. He works with me at the University of New South Wales and does a heck of a lot of awesome research on cancer. So Darren, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, my pleasure. This is a brave new world when you're doing everything out of our lounge rooms and offices.
Yeah, it seems that way. I noticed that you've created a little space as well for yourself.
I do. This is my little home TV studio. How do you like it?
Yeah, no, it's looking good, looking good. Let me get out of your way so you can show it off to everyone.
A little sign there to remind everyone to wash your hands.
So I'm taking, this is why you've had all these interviews lately to talk about what's going on with COVID. So
Yeah,
what is your messaging that you've been telling everybody?
well, it's a fun. Oh, it's a strange time to be trying to do science communication, I suppose. You know,
Yeah.
to be a scientist where you can pull apart all this complex information and help people understand it is kind of important at the moment. There's just so much science coming out, and a lot of it is coming out really fast, and it's quite complex. And people are kind of anxious and nervous and unsure about what to do. So
Yeah.
it's important for us to be able to help people find their way through all that complexity and sort of help them make the right decisions they need to make for them and their family, I guess.
Absolutely. So that's actually a great opportunity to say, if you guys have any questions for either of us right now, just drop them in the comments. I will take a look and I'll ask Darren as we go along. But I'll ask the first question if you don't mind, Darren.
Sure.
So this is kind of an interesting time, like you've mentioned. We've actually seen science happen in real time, and the public is seeing all the mistakes we're making, all our not understanding the system. So do you find this a lot more difficult to actually discuss with the public as a consequence?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and we're seeing. I mean, it's you know, the stakes are pretty high at the moment, right? People are very nervous about this virus, and as we've seen play out in the States, especially,
Yeah.
little bits of information can get picked up and really blown out of proportion. And so, you know, if someone like us who works in science does some experiments in the lab, and we find that some chemical might be able to stop a virus growing in some cells in a dish,
Yes.
the temptation is for people to go, wow, that might be a drug. Maybe I should start trying to get hold of this thing. And
Yes.
so that can be really, really challenging. And it puts a lot of responsibility on the scientists themselves to be a little bit careful about what we say and how we say it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and the information's, it's, you know, it used to be that we published a scientific paper, it would take months to get reviewed. And that's not a perfect system, but it helps to sort of, you know, even out the bumps sometimes in what's being
Absolutely.
said.
And now you've got somebody, like you mentioned, getting an idea, and then, you know, you have politicians and people in the public grabbing on and latching onto that and wanting to immediately start using it, which can be a really dangerous thing when we don't go through all that testing that we need to.
Yeah, that's right. And it, you know, it takes a long time to get a new drug, for example, or even a new vaccine. You know, it takes a long time because
Yeah.
the first thing we have to do is make sure we're not hurting people before we try to make them better. And so to do that just takes some time, and we're sort of seeing that play out, and it is incredibly frustrating for everybody. You know, we want it now, and we want it as quick as we can.
Absolutely.
And
Because
so,
everybody
yeah,
wants to head back to the beach.
That's it. Yeah, we're not allowed to do that anymore. We just got
Yes,
shut down
I
again
know.
today.
I know, that's exactly it. So yeah, we actually tried to get to the beach this morning, but it was closed today, well, for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I promised myself a swim at lunchtime, and by the time I got there, it was shut, and I wasn't very happy about it. But
Yeah, no, my boys weren't very
life.
happy about it either. They're watching this right now, kind of sad about the whole thing, but hopefully we'll be able to get there in the weekend.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, if people do the right thing, then it shouldn't be a problem, you know. And I
That's
think, look,
exactly it.
and on the whole, everyone has done the right thing. I've been so heartened by the way, especially in Australia, but also in New Zealand and other places, where people have really done the right thing, and there's been a real community spirit behind that. That's been a really encouraging part of it, I think.
Yeah, that has been pretty amazing compared to, you know, what's going on in the UK and the US. We've done a much better job of it. But
Yeah,
if I was to ask, should we keep continuing what we're doing right now? What do you think?
yeah. At the moment, I think we have to. I think it's you know, what we've done so far has worked. We've kind of all sacrificed a lot, you know, not just
Absolutely.
having to sit at home, not be able to go to school, but financial sacrifice as well. A lot of people
Yeah.
have lost their jobs and their incomes, and to get complacent now and to unwind that for the sake of probably only another few weeks of having to do this, I think would be a real disaster for everybody, you know. So
I totally agree.
we've got to not get complacent.
Yes, yeah. So if we can all just kind of keep going for another couple weeks, another few weeks, we should be okay.
I think so. I think, you know, what we've done so far has really worked. We're incredibly lucky that where we live, we have some geographical advantages and, you know, other things like that, and an amazing health system. And we're really seeing the benefits of that now. And we don't want to squander that opportunity that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, well, you hear that, everyone. If you can keep it going for a little bit longer, stay inside, you know, keep away from folks, you know, we'll be outside in no time, which will be really, really nice.
Yeah.
So Darren,
Short-term.
this is probably a little bit different than what you've done with other folks, because this show is all about not just talking about science, but actually getting folks, and especially kids, doing science.
Yeah.
So we have a little app that we'd like to use today, and I know you're not a psychologist and you don't study human brains, but I thought it'd be fun to do a little bit of...
brains.
Sorry, go ahead.
I study the cells in human brains, but by the time I get to look at them, they don't look much like a brain anymore. So.
Fair enough. I'd love to be able to chat with you a little bit about a little bit more about the research that you do as well. But let's jump in that game a little bit. And so if you can grab your phone, Darren, and listen to me, I'm going to jump you away right now for a second. Oops.
Sure.
Oh, I'm still getting used to that. And we'll jump into the game. So folks, again, if you can download PsycTests and type in online into this class code right up there. Type in online, hit submit, and you'll be ready to go and ready to play with us. And we'll be playing visual search, which is this one right here. All right? So if everyone can play visual search and tap that, and now you'll notice that there's two different categories. So Darren, can you hear me as well?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. So Darren, I want you to do O and Q, and I'm going to do O and P. And everyone out there, if your name starts from the letter A to the letter K, I want you to do O and Q. If your first name starts with L to Z, I want you to do M and P. All right? So let's go right in. And what you'll notice is you are looking for a specific target. For those doing O and P, you're looking for the letter O. And there's going to be a bunch of Q's on screen, and they're going to try and distract you. And that's the same kind of thing happening with M's and P's. So I'm going to grab my tablet, and Darren, are you ready?
I'm bad at video games. Let's see how we go.
Oh, you're going to do great, I promise. So you're doing O and Q, Darren. I'm going to do M and P. So for those folks looking for look for an M if you're looking amongst a bunch of P's. So try and do this as quickly as you can, all right? When you see it, press the check mark in the bottom corner. If you don't, press the X. So let's see how fast we can do this. And you can notice that there's a bunch of different M's and P's appearing in different numbers, and you got to try and do this as fast as you can. And it's really hard to do when you're talking. So Darren, how you doing over there?
I'm struggling. It's hard to do when you're concentrating.
So let's see. I'm doing all right. This is really hard to do while you're talking. Hopefully
I'm also really
everyone else, you're doing okay.
I'm really competitive, so I don't want to lose.
Let's see. Well, there's a leaderboard at the end. All right. So those are my results, and you probably got something similar as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up other folks.
I'm not done yet. Hang on. I'm almost there.
Keep going. Keep going. That's fine, Darren.
I'm all thumbs.
So we have a few results coming in. We've had 5 people finish.
All right. Done.
All right. Let's see if, let's see, I will grab.
Whoop. There you go.
Let's see. Oh, I'm going to just grab the results for the whole class right now, real quick. Let's see. Oops. This is always a little bit difficult to do when you've got just one person running this whole show. So
this is science in real time. This is what it's like.
Yes, no, that's exactly it. It's a little bit different. Oh, I'm going to jump out of that and make myself big again. And then
we did that like 20 odd times, right, in that test.
That's exactly it. So Darren, maybe you can actually explain, since you brought that up, why would we do it so many times?
Well, there's lots of reasons you might want to do it so many times, but one would be that you could alter, say, the number of letters that were on the screen and see how people perform with different levels of distraction.
Absolutely.
The other thing would be you want to make sure that whoever gets it just once or twice, it's not a fluke. So you want to measure sort of a consistent response over a number of different turns, I guess, which is something we do in science all the time. You know, we do experiments lots of times to make sure that we get the same result. I don't know. What are some other reasons, Michael?
Look, that is the absolute perfect reason. That was exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Because you don't, when you run your research, you don't get one animal, do you, or one mouse that you study?
No.
You get a bunch of them because you want to see.
Yeah, that's right. If we're doing a cancer experiment with some mice, we might do 6 mice with each different treatment that we're trying to use. because it's biology, and biology is noisy, and so you want to make sure you can see an effect of something over noise, basically.
That's exactly it, right? And
Yep.
and this is exactly what we've been doing here. So
Yep.
let's see. I'm gonna quickly pull up these results. Oops.
And getting back to talking about coronavirus drugs, that's one of the reasons you shouldn't just listen to one study that comes out and says, hey, this drug, it's amazing. We need to wait and see until it's done on lots of patients in lots of different studies, because then we can have some more confidence that it might be real.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah. We want to try and replicate things so we know that things are safe for people, and that we know that those results that should be happening are really happening.
That's right. Yep.
Cool. So what I'm gonna pop out for a second, and I'm gonna show folks the leaderboard. So a lot of folks didn't actually put their name in, and that's totally fine. But there are some really fast folks, which is pretty interesting. So Darren, I'm not sure if you actually have the YouTube channel up.
Oh, I had it. My kids have run away with the iPad.
That's what happens when we work from home. But I'll explain it really, really quickly. We've got folks who are going really, really fast. But the kind of interesting thing is there's a lot of people who are making mistakes as well. And it seems the faster you're going, the more mistakes you're making, if you look on the upper left, which kind of makes sense, because when you're trying to react really quickly, you're not really taking in all that information, and sometimes you're more likely to make more mistakes. But kind of the fun part that I want to show you guys here, and this has absolutely worked out perfectly, Darren, just like I showed you when I sent you those data. It's so nice when we have things work out like that.
Makes a happy scientist.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, Darren, remember you did O's and Q's, right?
Yeah.
And did you have any trouble finding these O's in amongst these Q's?
I did, because they look really similar, right? An O and a Q is almost the same thing. So if you're sort of scanning around quickly with your eyes, which is what I was trying to do, it's easy to mistake one for the other, or to miss one.
And when did you have most of that trouble? When there's a few things on screen or a lot of things?
No, when there's lots of things on screen. So, being a scientist, I tried to be systematic and do a quick up and down and then a quick left and right scan, rather than just sort of randomly, shooting around. But even then, the more on the screen, the more difficult it was.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we see here as well. When there were more things on screen, if you look at the graph on your right, when it says O's and Q's, you see that green bar getting bigger. And that's because it's taken you longer to actually react when there's more things on screen. And it's just like Darren said, you had trouble making sure that O was there. But those M's and P's, I have to admit, Darren, I gave myself the easy task.
Yeah, I noticed that. No, you're the boss, mate. You do what you like.
Well, I had to keep talking while I was doing it. It was troublesome.
Right. Fair enough.
But you can see how this has worked out so nicely. And often our reaction is affected by the things that are around us and the things that may be distracting us. So when your mom and dad actually call you for dinner, you probably aren't listening as well because you're playing video games and you kind of forget and don't hear. And then, well, mom and dad end up getting a little bit madder.
Well, that happens to scientists too. That happens to us in the lab. Sometimes you get distracted and you make a mistake, and that's another reason to do experiments lots of times, right?
That's exactly, because human error.
Yeah, exactly.
And Darren, that's a great opportunity for me to ask, are you doing all this science by yourself?
No, science is a team sport. Very, very few scientists work on their own. Some sciences you can do it on your own, but no, we work in teams. We have teams of research assistants, sometimes postdoctoral fellows who work with us, and we always have various students from, sometimes people from sort of the late stages of their undergrad degrees and postgraduate students who are doing masters or PhDs. They'll come into the lab and do research projects. So it's very much a team sport. It's one of the things I love most about being a scientist is
me too.
We have our own little research teams, and then we work in bigger project teams or department teams and collaborations all around the world. It's it's one of the great things about being a scientist.
And that's probably another reason why you want to actually replicate a lot of your data, because you have a whole bunch of people working on these problems, and one person may make a mistake at some time because they're having a bad day.
Yeah, that's right. And for things like drugs and vaccines, especially before one of those drugs or vaccines will be able to be used in the clinic to treat people. Those trials will be done internationally because we want to see that it works in different hospitals in different parts of the world with all the variables that are at play there. And so that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, because what might work in Australia may not work in the US.
For lots of different reasons. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So actually, Darren, let's move away from COVID, because I'm sure people have kind of heard so much about it over the last little while. And I think you summarized it really well. Let's stay in a little bit longer, and it's going to be better. We're all going to be better off because of it. So
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the research that you do? So you said you work on brains and you're a cancer researcher.
Yeah, it's a strange link, isn't it? So I don't actually work on brain cancer at all. So maybe we can step it back a step from cancer and brain. You know, we work on really the sort of nitty gritty nuts and bolts inside cells. So, you know, we're all made up of trillions of cells, right? And all our cells do particular jobs, like make our brain work, or our liver, or our eyes, or blood, or any of those things.
Absolutely.
And so we work on the machines that are buzzing away inside those cells to make those cells work. And one of the really important machines that we have is kind of like it's the best way I can describe it. It's kind of like a garbage disposal and recycling system that exists inside our cells. So all the bits of our cells, the proteins and things, get damaged through various things that happen in life. And if you don't deal with those damaged proteins, the cells can get messed up. They can die when they're not supposed to die, or they can grow out of control when they're not supposed to grow out of control. And so we have this system in our cells to sort of take out the trash, or to recycle the bits of our cells that we can use again. And that system gets sort of skew-if in a lot of different diseases, lots of different diseases, in fact. So that's a really important system for our normal everyday function, particularly in, you know, controlling our immune system, controlling our metabolism, controlling the way our cells know when it's time to divide, all that sort of stuff.
And probably aging as well, I guess.
Aging, it's a really important part of aging. Yeah. So it's a, you know, to think about inside your cell, you have, if you look up at the night sky and you see all those stars, you have a lot more proteins inside a single cell out of the trillions that we have that make us up than all the stars you can see in the sky. And the cell has to be able to deal with that and keep everything working properly. And so that's the system that we work on.
So you'd expect some mistakes to happen, because there's so many possibilities for errors, isn't it?
There are mistakes made all the time, you know, and every time a cell divides, so we've constantly got cells dividing to replace aged cells or to repair damage. And every time a cell divides, there's a chance that it'll make a mistake copying our DNA, which is the genome, the genetic code. And sometimes those mistakes can actually get read into making the different proteins that make up all these machines inside our cells that keep us living. So, and those mistakes can sometimes go really, you know, sometimes they do nothing, and sometimes they can really cause the cell to start misbehaving in all sorts of different kinds of ways.
Because those proteins have to fold and make a specific shape, don't they?
That's right. Yeah. So, you know, there are a string of amino acids, different chemicals. There's 20 different forms of amino acids. Some of them we get from our food, some of them we make ourselves. And they form these big three-dimensional, these huge, well, they look huge, they're tiny, they're minuscule, but they form these amazingly complex three-dimensional machines that are running away inside our cells, doing all of the jobs that cells need to do. And they're so finely tuned, you know, they've been so finely tuned through evolution over such a long time that they don't really have a lot of wiggle room for things to go wrong. And so when they do, it's a real problem for cells and for then our bodies to be able to deal with.
So I guess you're dealing with some of those very specific problems that cells undergo, and that's cancer.
Right. So cancer is a great example of that. And there's a lot of interest in using drugs now that can target this system to help kill cancer cells, because cancer cells have lots of mutations. They make lots of mistakes in the various machines they're making inside the cells. And that makes them more sensitive to drugs that can stop this recycling system, because they rely on that recycling system so heavily.
Yeah,
and it can also be part of, you know, the way that our cells can become resistant to certain drugs that we already use to treat cancer. That's another important side of it. And one thing we're really interested in is metabolism, is the way our cells use fuel to make energy.
Yes.
And cancer cells do that very differently to normal cells. And so that provides a window for us to treat the cancer cell differently to the normal cell.
Oh, that sounds like a really cool opportunity to kind of explore how to shut down the energy that a cancer cell kind of needs to keep growing.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just about energy. You know, to make a cancer, you've got all these cells growing really fast. And to do that,
Right.
they have to make lots of all of the building blocks for new cells. And so they do that from the fuel that we eat and that we generate in our bodies. And so it's looking at how the cells use that fuel in different ways, and how we might
Okay.
be able to target that. That's becoming really interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's so, a lot of biology and a lot of science now is starting to look at um, a lot of the proteins that we ingest and the bacteria that are in our bodies and how those bacteria work with us to digest, all the food that we eat. Are you suggesting that this may actually be important in dealing with cancer as well?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't realize there's a complex interaction
Yeah.
between all of the little bacteria and yeast and things that live in our gut and other parts of our body. And they not only help us to digest the food that we eat, but they also help us to control immune responses. And we're finding all sorts of interesting links into how those might play out into causing
Wow.
disease and also into changing the way people respond to different diseases as well.
Wow. So that means there could be a lot of different responses from a lot of different people. And does that make it a lot harder to actually find solutions to a big problem like cancer?
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, if you dig down deep enough, every single patient with a cancer has probably got a slightly different disease, even though we lump
Wow.
it all together and say this person's got breast cancer or this person's got prostate cancer. Really, every single person's disease is just a little bit different from everybody else's. And so it's sort of the deeper we dig, the more we understand about that, which is both fascinating from understanding biology, but a little bit
Sure.
intimidating from trying to treat people because it makes it harder to treat big groups of people the same way.
Oh, I could imagine. And then we get back to that same problem of all the different types of drugs and solutions to this problem and all the different tests that we have to do to make sure everything's working.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of interest. There's been for a little while now. There's been a lot of interest in trying to get more sort of. I mean, we use the word personalized. It's not really
Yep.
personalized, but to get a little bit more specific in the treatments that we apply to each different patient, depending on all of the different tests and genetic
Right.
type experiments we can do, so that we try to get maximum benefit from taking the drugs, and also trying to minimize side effects and try to not treat people with drugs that they might not respond to, for example.
Right. Oh, so you've got your work cut out for you then by the sounds of it.
It's a complicated, yeah, it's a big complicated thing. There's so many people, in your lifetime, you have about a 1 in 3 chance of cancer by the time you turn
Wow.
sort of 80. So that means a lot of people, interact with this disease. So from that perspective, there's a lot to understand.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, actually, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions from folks that have come
Right.
out. So we've got a question here. What recent developments in cancer research are we always making progress with all the different types of experiments that we're doing?
Yep, there's constant progress. I mean, I have to say, it's almost impossible for any one person to keep on top of. I think one of the things
Yes.
that everybody's really excited about at the moment is using immunotherapy. And there's different ways of doing that, but it's essentially we're manipulating patients or our own immune systems to fight the cancer on our behalf.
Right.
So we can do that with all sorts of cool sort of transplant techniques with cells, where we take cells out of someone's body and we immunize them against their cancer and then put them back in
Right.
again. Or we can use drugs to manipulate the immune system. So cancers are really good at hiding away from immune cells, and they
Yep.
sort of have like this cloak of invisibility that the immune system can't see them. And there's some really amazing drugs coming through now that kind
Very
of rip that
cool.
cloak of invisibility off and say, hey, immune cells, come over here and sort this out. So that's
Wow.
really
So
exciting.
you're essentially turning up the power of the body to actually fight the cancer itself.
Yep, that's right. And that
That's cool.
sounds, yeah, it sounds almost like science fiction, but it's
Yeah.
for the patients that it works incredibly well. Yeah.
Wow, that's very cool. That's very neat.
Yeah.
So, we've got a question here. So, can nanoscience be used to fight cancer?
Oh, absolutely. Nanoscience. Nanoscience is science at a really, really small scale. So
Yep.
little things smaller than the size of your hair. A colleague of mine, Cara Perro down in Wollongong, builds these amazing little nanoparticles, these tiny little balls of fatty molecules. And inside
Cool.
those little balls of fatty molecules, she wraps up particular drugs. And then on the
Wow.
outside of these amazing little molecules, she puts little proteins on that help to target those drugs just to a certain cell type. And there's lots of people doing lots of different ways of the same sort of approach, but it's a good way of being able to get drugs where they need to be so that the side effects are lowered and the drugs are more effective.
Wow.
There's all sorts of amazing stuff being done with nanotechnology. Yeah, it's
Wow.
incredible.
So we're starting to see a point where we can actually manipulate things at a really, really submolecular kind of level almost.
Yeah, and even, I mean, a few years ago, the guys that won the Nobel Prize for, I think it was for chemistry, but they won the prize for designing little tiny nanobots. So they're little tiny machines made out of molecules, essentially, that work like robots. And people are now starting to use those to put into biological systems to manipulate what's going on inside the cells.
It is amazing. A pretty neat time to be alive.
It really is. Yeah, it really, really is. It's amazing.
That's very cool. And I think we've got a message. Actually, we've got a question from Mia. So thanks, Mia, for asking that. And this one is, how do vaccines actually work?
Wow, that's a great question. It's a pretty topical question too at the moment. I mean, basically, a vaccine works by tricking your body into thinking that you've had a disease, even though you haven't actually had the disease. So to understand that, we need to just take a step back. If you get an infection from a bacteria or a virus, your immune system responds to that, and it tells certain cells in your immune system to go and fight off that invader, that virus or that bacteria. And then at the same time, one of the ways we were able to do this, we make antibodies. We have special cells in our body that make antibodies that neutralize the invaders as well.
Okay.
And the really cool thing about our immune system is it has a memory. So even though that infection might go away, you maintain in your body little cells that remember, I remember what that bug looks like. I've seen that thing before.
Wow.
And so if you get reinfected, you're able to really, really quickly mount an immune response. So most of the time you wouldn't even know you've been reinfected. You don't even get sick from it. And so a vaccine basically does the same trick. So vaccines can work in lots of different ways, but usually what they do is take a small part of the bacteria or the virus that we want to vaccinate against, or an inactivated dead form of the bacteria or virus, and by putting it into our immune system, it kind of tells the immune system, this is what it looks like, go and make some response and make some defense against it. So just in case the actual real live infection comes along at some point, we can fight it.
Oh, very cool. So by using that, you're telling us that you're actually training the body to recognize what it needs to attack.
Yep.
And then when we take,
basically,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's basically what we're doing. So it's kind of like it's preparing the immune system to say ahead of time, you know, if this thing comes along, you've already seen it, you know what it looks like, and you know how to deal with it. And then it means that we can ramp up our immune response a lot faster than if we hadn't seen it before. And we can even now start to do this.
Oh, sorry.
we can even now start to do the same thing with cancer cells. So we can literally take someone's cancer cells and immunize their immune system in a dish, and then put some of those immune cells back into the patient. And hopefully the immune system will then see the cancer as not part of somebody's body, but as an invading thing that it needs to take care of.
Now that would be really cool, because vaccines aren't normally used to treat things like cancer, are they?
No, they're not. It's a really new approach, and
very cool.
There's a whole bunch of different ways people are trying to use the immune system to do that.
Oh well, Darren, I think that's a really great place to stop, because it brings us a little bit of hope with where we're going, and shows us the power of vaccines and how useful they can be to us and to our bodies in training and to fight everything that doesn't belong there.
Absolutely. I mean, you could, you know, a lot of people know about antibiotics and how amazing and how many millions of lives antibiotics have saved, and you could make an even bigger argument for vaccines. It's hard to calculate how many lives get saved every year from vaccines.
Very cool. Darren, thank you so much for being on our show. So we had Dr. Saunders here talking about cancer, COVID, and we even played a little game with him. Darren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you later.
That was great fun. See you, mate. Bye.
Cheers. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that. We learned a little bit about vaccines and how they can be used, not just to stop things like the flu or maybe COVID very soon, but also how they could even potentially be used to solve things like cancer. So if you have any more questions, drop them down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them for you guys, and I'll also see if I can hook up with Dr. Saunders again and get him answering some of those questions for you guys as well. So don't worry about it. If your question wasn't answered, I'll do my best to make sure it's answered to the best of my ability. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. A couple things before we go. If you do want to drop any photos for us, here are our socials again. I'd love to see what you guys are doing in your homes, because like I said, you get to see me, but I don't get to see you. And the other thing is, we also started our new term-long program. So if you want to join in doing science with us each week online with video games, where we're actually collecting some more data, which will be more focused than this show with scientists and guests is, then drop in on ingenious.arludo.com and you can sign up and I can meet with you guys each week while we do science together. And with that, folks, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next week. All the best.